Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Inside segment. I'm Harold Fisher. We are at the Reporters Roundtable again with a look at some of the top stories of the past week. As always, we have quite a bit on deck. President Donald Trump to hit the 6-month mark next month. How has the media handled it? Israel and Iran holding on to a fragile ceasefire after Trump drops bunker buster bombs and an F-bomb. ICE arrests are ramping up, and so is the pushback. RFK Stadium politics in D.C. Closing arguments coming tomorrow in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. A Maryland resident owes D.C. more than $160,000 in traffic violations. And, of course, we'll end on an up note, as in heat. What's your best heat story for beating the heat? My guests are Sonia Ross, founder of Black Women Unmuted, Misha Green, managing editor of the Washington Informer, and Jennifer Thomas, professor of media journalism and film at Howard University. Ladies, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So let us start with President Trump. 6 months next month. I'll just start with you, Jennifer. This is really your wheelhouse. How do you think the media has handled, legacy media, I should say, to start off, these first 5 months or so?
Well, I guess the way the legacy media has started off in the first 6 months has been how it has been in his last administration. It's difficult, I think, for legacy media to just try to keep up with everything that comes out of his mouth on a daily basis, because so much time is spent on trying to fact check and follow up on many of the current stories, that a lot of the stories that require or should require the actual follow-up are not getting covered as much. I think that much of the legacy media, because of all of the recent lawsuits and things that have taken place since Trump came back in office, have shied away, I feel, from some of the hard-hitting follow-up questions. We're back. This is a deja vu moment from his first administration, although I feel it's gotten a bit worse, where anytime members of the media question him, as recently as just this week and probably today, they're attacked. If they question anything that comes out of his mouth, much which is not true. So when journalists try to, call him out on his non-truths, then they are attacked. And I think that in general, the media has let a lot of things go by that they should have held him to the fire on more. But it's almost like, what are you going to do? There's so much you can do in a time frame. So I think it's going to involve a lot more of those deep dive investigative sidebar stories to really delve into some of the issues that I feel warrant more thorough coverage.
There are a lot of balls to juggle.
Yeah.
Certainly, Jennifer. There's just so much going on. But, Misha, one of the things, and I want Sonia to comment on this also, one of the things that we are hearing from the White House press secretary is that this is the most transparent president in history. But there is a difference between transparency and availability. Do you think that he has been the most available? I mean, he's always holding court in the Oval Office, which is really unusual, because when he is at the White House, those kinds of things happen quite often, several times a week.
I think that Donald Trump has always been a media personality in much of the world's eyes. And so during this administration, I think even differently than the first, he has allowed a level of access that is I think almost alarming in many ways, just in terms of some of the conversations that at least, the media has been invited to and open to, and even some of the things that he's allowed folks to see. Granted, nothing is really off the table for Donald Trump, as we've seen, even down to his language. But I think this original question about how he's being covered is very interesting, because though he's allowing access, and transparency is a whole different story because he's saying a lot, but there's not been a lot of facts in there. And I would say that from the White House press secretary all the way up to the president. But as Jennifer said, it's very difficult to hold this administration accountable because they do clap back. We saw the example with that, with the Gulf of America versus the Gulf of Mexico, and what happened to the Associated Press in that case. We saw how he treated the White House Correspondents' Dinner this year, not showing up, not supporting it. But we also saw what Eugene, who was then the president of the White House Correspondents Association at the time, did, which is offer a call to action for us as storytellers, which is making sure we're just stating facts. And I think the benefit that we have at the Washington Informer as the Black press is that we can say that these facts also affect the Black community in this way. And it's simply facts. And so nothing that we're doing, which is data that's provided by the White House, can Donald Trump push back on. And I think that some people could say that's playing it safe, but I think that's also the job of the journalist, which is to be the fact storyteller and to then connect the dots for people and help them understand that as a factual storyteller, this is how it affects their lives. And that's really important right now.
Sonia, what about that coverage? I think the other thing is you have the legacy media on one hand, and they're trying to fact check Donald Trump, but also they have the right-wing media bloggers that are now in the press rooms, and it seems like the legacy media is also having to fact check them as well.
Harold, the problem is the problem is that the legacy media insists upon normalizing this man because normalizing him fits their modus operandi of how the news gets gathered and how the news gets reported. He has never shown any respect for that process from the beginning. And at some point, here we're 10 years in now on normalizing Donald Trump, asking him the hard questions like we know we're supposed to do, and this is our job. Well, our job changed the minute this man walked into the White House. And you cannot go at him. This is tactical warfare for media right now, and you cannot win a fight, win a battle, win a war by going after your opponent in their area of strength. You have to find the Achilles heel and exploit it to the nth degree to take them down. And media just are not doing that. Legacy media in particular, want to hold true to the notion that they can ask questions, that there is freedom of the press, that this man needs to be held accountable through fact checking. No, actually, Donald Trump is using legacy media as a megaphone for his fire hose of lies that they put out there with assistance from the fringe media. That's what I call them, the fringe media, who he has elevated to covering his White House. I think the outcome would be dramatically different in terms of the news that gets to the American people every day if legacy media were to make a decision that they won't go to his press briefings, that they won't go to his news conferences, that they're not going to travel with him anymore, and leave his megaphone to the limited number of people who are his sucklings, who go along and get along with the messaging that he has put forth. But as long as the media insist on doing things the way the media have done for hundreds of years, covering a president who is like no other president this country has ever had, we're going to keep getting the same results. And this is why you've seen millions of Americans take to the street like, who do you think we are? Boo Boo the fool. Stop indulging this man's lies. Take a different strategy. Imagine what would happen if major press never reported a punctuation mark of what he has to say. He needs that legacy media more than they need him. And unfortunately, the go along, get along has reached a level now where it's going to be almost impossible to cover him accurately and adequately as long as they stick to that old standard.
Let me throw something. Let me throw a quick curveball before the break, and I think this is something occurred to me, and I think all of us could talk about this, but I really want to start with Misha, get Jennifer's input, and then I'll go to the break, and we may move on to the next topics. When I made the comment about legacy media, and Misha, all of us know, but you work for the Washington Informer. Historically, the Black press has been separate from legacy media. We had Black Folks News, and then we had legacy media. Has there been a transition? Do you believe now that Black media, because of where we are politically in this country, is now much, much closer to legacy media? Take your.
There we go. So yes, no, we could talk about this all day.
And we don't have that kind of time.
We don't have that kind of time.
Right, but go ahead.
But as I prepared to go to the National Newspaper Publishers Association conference in Savannah, where we're celebrating more than 200 Black press publications out there doing really great work, I have to uplift the work that's happening, but acknowledge that there is still a lot of work to be done in terms of mainstream recognition. And that's not ever been the goal of the Black press, to be mainstream. I really want to make that clear. But in terms of having access to into certain places, to getting certain interviews and things like that, it's been a constant fight down to right now, as April Ryan is the White House press correspondent for NNPA, or Black Press USA. But that has been a fight. And so, and I want to uplift the work that she's doing. She's the longest Black woman in the White House press corps. And I think Black person in general, but I always got to add Black woman there. And so her fearless freedom fighting and freedom writing, which I say is what we are as the Black press, has really ensured that we've been able to get a voice, at least in the White House. But there's still a lot of work to be done. And as somebody who is consistently fighting for recognition for the Washington Informer and being a walking advertisement so that people know about us, not Washingtonians, but again, the mainstream. And I think that's something really important to know. It is still a challenge to this day. Though we're doing great work, though we're getting in other rooms, we're pushing for it. We're knocking down the door.
Yeah, Jennifer, I do want you to respond to that question also, and before we get on to the other topics, I just thought when that came up, it was just such an important point of kind of the evolution of the Black press and media coverage of where we are now. But I'm going to let you do that after the break. So just hold on. We will get to all of that. Don't forget, You can hear this at every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The Original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation at the Reporters Roundtable with a look at some of the top stories of the past week. My guests are Sonia Ross, founder of Black Women Unmuted, Misha Green, managing editor of the Washington Informer, and Jennifer Thomas, professor of media journalism and film at Howard University. I did a little sidebar before the break when I was talking about, Black media, where it is now in the midst of the politics of what we are dealing with right now. And just to refresh and try to simplify the question, historically, Jennifer, there was a time when it was legacy press, or one could even argue the white press and the Black press. But now, whether it's, politics, socioeconomic changes in this country, covering Black folks a lot of times seems like you're covering mainstream. Yes or no? What do you think, real quick?
I wouldn't necessarily say it as a yes or no question, because if you think about it, if we look at historically, we know that the late, great Congressman John Lewis said, if it weren't for the media, the civil rights movement would have been like a bird without wings. So our role, as journalists and as those who are storytellers, we tell the stories. There are white stories, they're Black stories, but they're stories. So the fundamental purpose of journalists are the same, is to hold the government accountable, to hold the officials accountable, to tell stories in context that are relevant to our communities. And so whether we're under the notion of a Black press or mainstream, the purpose, in my opinion, should still be the same. Now, continuing that, of course, at Howard University, where we're training the next generation of Black journalists, and our HU News Service is part of NNPA, a proud member, and we share our stories with members of the Black press. We're still telling some of those same stories. We're talking about how the administration is affecting people in our communities. I think the blessing and the burden and the blessing of the Black press is that we're not getting that mainstream attention, but we're telling the stories in context that might not otherwise be told. So how are these issues affecting people that look like you and me? How are they affecting children? How are they affecting the government and small business owners in the Black church? Well, unfortunately, with legacy media, they're not covering those stories, right? So that's our purpose. And that's what we train our journalists, tell those stories. We're fortunate to still cover the White House as college students. And shout out also to Ebony McMorris. I know we mentioned April Ryan, but with American Urban Radio Networks, who's been covering the White House. So we're in those spaces. Our mission and purpose is the same, but I think we even go a step further as members of the Black press, because we have a mission to make sure that stories of our people are being told, and that we have a space in the room to ask those questions that are prevalent to our communities.
I think I'm going to come and sit in your class one day. Right.
Harold, may I add one?
Real quick. We've talked too long about this.
Okay, super duper quick. And that I want a point of clarification. The Black press don't need mainstream attention. Okay, right. We don't need mainstream audience. If anybody's getting it right, it's the Black press right now. 198 years.
That wasn't my question.
I know it wasn't your question. Right. I just wanted to make that point. The Black press are the best equipped to go at this. If you look at the way things are happening right now, where you have Black journalists who have been shed or are shedding the mainstream organizations where they once worked, and they are voices out there now independently reporting the news. That's also the Black press. Know and understand, go and get your information from the Black people you trust to be putting the information out there in the most accurate way possible, and forget that mainstream media attention.
Yep.
Let me move on. Thank you for that. Let me move on to, and we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, because tomorrow we're actually going to have a political roundtable to talk about some of the issues in the Middle East. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, and I'll start with you, Sonia. Israel, Iran dealing with a very fragile ceasefire. There was the bunker buster bombs and the F-bomb by the president as he was walking to the helicopter. Make it make sense. For us, it has certainly overshadowed coverage this week. There hasn't been a whole lot else going on as far as news coverage is concerned.
No, I will not make it make sense, because it does not make sense. It is nonsense. And if anything, that anybody who wants something that makes sense, take a look right now at what is going on at NATO and what the U.S. allies are doing and how they are consolidating, and know and understand the fact that this president, the 47th president of the United States, the 45th remix, is putting this country in a position where we have no allies. Right after this situation popped off with this bombing that may or may not have obliterated Iran's nuclear capability, Iran did what Iran does. They went to their allies, and guess who was the first? That would be Vladimir Putin in Russia. And Donald Trump appears to be a president who has tucked his tail between his legs and gone to NATO to meet with what's left of the NATO alliance. And they let him in the room, but they've made abundantly clear to them who they are working with as allies. And that is what we need to be concerned about in this country, not how effective the bunker buster bombs were, or the fact that he circumvented war power authority that he's supposed to get from Congress before doing things. He hasn't met with the Gang of Eight and this sort of stuff. Internally, he's not going to do that because he has no respect for the Constitution, and he is not going to do things the way they have been done traditionally. So know and understand that this country is being put in a position to be without any allies. So whatever he gets us into on the world stage, we won't have any friends to go in there and fight with us, or this with them, because I'm in the 92%. We're relaxing. But the United States is out here flying solo on a ridiculous mission. And that is what this nation needs to be primarily concerned about.
I'll let you make a comment about this, Misha, but then I do need to move on. We still have a lot to get to. Talk to me about the real impact of this whole F-bomb. A lot of coverage about it. Certainly, we know you don't use that kind of language, so clutch your pearls. But
pearls are already clutched. And always there. Yes. No, I mean, here's the thing. That F-bomb, and we just had this beautiful conversation about coverage of Donald Trump, and particularly over the past 6 months, but how folks are covering him depending on who you are. And I think that's a perfect example. You look at how Fox, which we expect nothing less, but how they covered Donald Trump's use of the F-bomb, saying that he was so frustrated because these other world leaders would not maintain the ceasefire agreement. And it took him to that point. But I have looked at so many, rolling my eyes. It comes across my feed, not because I'm searching for it. Let me be clear and state that on the record. But other Fox coverage of the president, of other politicians were very, very critical of their language, and particularly Democrats. The way the same person who called Trump's language out of frustration then quoted Jasmine Crockett, the representative from Texas, using the same exact word and saying how offensive it was. And so, again, I think this is another example of the role of press, which is just saying, this is a fact. I loved Abby Phillip on CNN recently, just did a back-to-back of that. And she didn't say much other than I think she did a little pun with the F-bomb and Fox, which I thought was really nice. That was last night. That was really nice. So if we could all get there. But right. I think that's our job, is to just say, this is the fact here, and this is what's happening. And show, yes, Donald Trump uses ridiculous language, but he always has. Are we surprised that he grabbed people by the what? That was caught on camera. There's a lot that he said in the past. So I'm not surprised by this media personality using such language.
Yeah. Let me move on to this next topic. The ICE arrests ramping up. There's also been some community pushback, and I'm not talking about just the protests that we saw during the parade or the military parade in DC, but I'm talking about some real pushback where these, and I have to say, I have to pause, Jennifer, because there's so many moving parts around this. First of all, we don't know if these are ICE agents or not.
Well, that's the problem.
I mean, that's one of the problems. There certainly has been, allow me to talk about speculation and not necessarily the known facts, that some of these people may be bounty hunters, some of these people may be Proud Boys recruits, that these are not immigration and custom enforcement agents. These are not federal agents. But this issue has also evolved. Talk to me about your thoughts about how this thing is evolving.
Well, I think, what Donald Trump and his administration have been able to do is invoke this sentiment of terror and fear in people, which is coming right out of his playbook. He said he was going to get rid of these dangerous illegal immigrants, and now he can tell his followers, I'm doing that. But to your point, the problem is, I think studies have shown that at least half of those that have been detained by ICE have not had a criminal record.
Mm-hmm.
Many have not been convicted of any crime. But what is being done is just illegal. You're just going to grab someone off the street, like you said, in plain clothes or in a mask. You don't know who they are. They have yielding weapons. They're not allowing government officials to come and check on them. Their families don't know where they are. People need medications. They're sending them off. They're disappearing them. It's very, very problematic. And it makes me go back to thinking of, what kind of country are we in? We call ourselves, and he and the administration like to tout that we're a nation of laws. But like we were saying earlier, when you just talk about the facts and look at what's being done, what is being done is not lawful. We do not have a lot of violent people just running around, as we know, and the facts will show that most of the Americans that are committing crimes are Americans and are not people who are here legally. And then, of course, we had recently where he talked about after hearing criticism, oh, well, no, you're arresting the wrong people because they're, cleaning our lawns and taking care of our kids and doing these other things that he says we're taking jobs from those great Americans. Oh, well, no, we're going to lessen up on that. You're going to see a change soon. So I think it's gotten really absolutely out of control. And it's troubling because what are our lawmakers doing about it? And those are the stories I think that we need to be talking more about as members of the media as well.
Mm-hmm. Sonia, when you look at some of the pushback on the streets, there was a video today where community members were literally shaming, forcefully using colorful metaphors and handheld video cameras and walking so-called ICE agents out of their community when they came to make arrests. Do you think that we're going to see more of this ad hoc pushing back, short of any change in the laws, short of anything that any federal or Supreme Court may do?
Yes, you'll see more of that as people really wrap their brains around how to pull that off, what they do and how they engage, so that they also are not personally at risk, because that is a concern for folks as well. But you will see more of that. And then as this nation marches toward the the midterm elections that may or may not happen, because we are in a difficult situation right now. You'll begin to see more pressure applied to the lawmakers who are supposed to be checking the executive branch, the legislative branch that's supposed to check the executive branch. The judicial branch has done some checking, and the judicial branch has done some caving. But you'll begin to see more pressure to perform checks and balances, because the checks and balances are really what's necessary to bring a halt to this kind of thing. It is perfectly fine to engage at the grassroots level and let that pressure rise up from the ground up. Groundswell is never a bad thing, but for it to be truly effective, is going to have to come with some checks and balances attached from the legislative branch.
You know what I'm thinking, based on just the comment you just made, Sonia? I fear that there may be an Edmund Pettus Bridge moment with this. And I think that where you're going to see these federal agents, whether all of them are or not, clash with brown and black people in these communities when communities get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And we keep saying, certainly no one wants murderers, rapists, drug dealers in their neighborhood, whether they are here illegally or not, whether they are black or white, whether they were born here. Nobody wants that stuff in their community. But when you start picking up people who have done nothing else other than come into the country illegally, which of course, as we know, is a misdemeanor, then I just suspect that could be an issue. Let us talk a little bit about RFK Stadium politics in DC. Misha, the countdown is on for the DC Council to make a decision about voting, with that deadline of July 15th still looming. We still don't know whether or not that's going to be a separate bill. Came out last week that this, a $4 billion deal, maybe a $5 billion deal. Just kind of, where are we? This is executive branch of the DC government, the legislative branch with, economics and housing folks on the street in the middle.
Yes. Well, I mean, as you put it so well, because there are just so many nuances to this conversation. You have the executive branch who is saying this will make so much money for the district in the long term, while the district, might I add you, is currently still on a budget hole from what happened with the CR. And, obviously this conversation about RFK Stadium was happening far before even Trump was back in the White House, much less the CR and things like that. And so though I know that Mayor Bowser and her administration has been really, really passionate about the commanders coming back to the district proper, and the RFK Stadium move being such a great economic boom for the district in many ways, people are worried about what's happening today and their finances today, and the hiring freeze that is still happening and things like that. And so then you have the legislative branch, to your point, who is worried about the district's economics. And there have been certain things that Mayor Bowser has said, no matter what, we're going to take care of, that the legislative has said, okay, such as with early child care, for example, and things like that the mayor really ensured was tight in her budget, and so that families would not be affected. But I also think that the legislative branches they're just tired. RFK Stadium in this conversation is part of something that they're already balancing, which is a longer council session than they are accustomed to. And quite frankly, to summarize Council Chairman Phil Mendelson's words, one, they're ready to go on break. And then you have the people who, there are people like Ward 7 council member Wendell Felder, who's brand new, who is certainly supportive of it. But then his people who are saying, well, and while we're excited about new businesses and the games potentially being nearby us, parking will be awful. What will happen to the price of my property and things like that, on top of, again, the problems that they have, like paying their rent, like buying eggs, like making sure their kids can get to and from school right now, that are still real issues here in the district. And so, I think all of us are kind of scratching our head. There's a lot also happening on July 15th called the Ward 8 special election for the DC Council. And so I think that the council has a lot of moving pieces right now, and RFK Stadium, I don't think they want it to be their priority, and yet it is.
Yeah. Go ahead real quick.
Well, I was going to quickly add, what's a boon to DC kind of has been a blow to PG, I think, too, with PG County, because, the stadium was there, off in Largo area. And now Prince George's County is losing Six Flags. All these institutions that were so important economically to Prince George's County here in the DMV are going away. Yes, and then the great pushback that came about the FBI coming to Prince George's County. So, there's a lot of residents that feel, that Prince George's County is getting the short end of the stick. And, all the economic boon that will come, as Mish mentioned, to Washington, D.C., aside from all the questions that there are, I think has been, at what cost to our neighbors.
Yeah. Let me move on to the Sean Diddy Combs trial. The prosecution and the defense arrested earlier this week. Closing arguments start tomorrow. Sonia, you have the floor. I want to make sure we get everything else in. Yeah, but that's my question.
Well, yeah. I'm wondering, I was surprised to see that the prosecution rested his case, to be honest, because I still was looking for the racketeering. I guess I was expecting there to be a straight line between Mr. Combs and the racketeering that he's accused of, and it's a blurred line. It's a really shaky line, and since he's in there with the best defense that he can afford, it raises the question of, will he walk? Will he walk, or will they not let him walk? Because Bill Cosby could afford a better defense, and he went to prison. So who knows what can happen here? And it's really hard to say what the outcome there might be, especially when you consider, look how long things went down with R. Kelly. And many times R. Kelly had managed to walk, and now he's in prison.
Yeah.
So I actually think the verdict will be a surprise no matter which way it goes. I think the defense may have a million ways to poke holes in the prosecution's case, but I do think that verdict is going to be a shocker no matter which way it swings.
Yeah. Real quick, Jennifer, 30 seconds with this. I got to tell you, I am not squeamish. I don't have pearls, but I was still clutching them just listening to some of that evidence. My gosh.
Well, there was a lot, if you think of Cassie Ventura and then the woman Jane, and, I would hate to be a member of that jury that had to watch, the videos that they watched, the judge watched, and Sean Diddy Combs was able to watch. The media was not privy to see, but a lot of graphic testimony. But and to what Sonia says, it really depends on who you believe. Are you going to believe that it was consensual? Are you going to believe that, the text messages prove one thing, that show there was no coercion? Or are you going to believe that sometimes that's a result of victimization of years or months or years of abuse? He could face life in prison, right? I believe.
Yes.
The prosecution removed some of the charges, which surprised a lot, but then the defense only took 30 minutes in their summation and called no witnesses. But, they just have to prove it has to go beyond a shadow of a doubt. So if they raise that doubt, like Sonia said, if they punch enough holes, then he could walk, and, for lack of a better way of saying it. So I it's very troubling as someone, as a Howard person who went to Howard and gave a commencement address that was actually not bad and had given money the university gave back and had been such an icon, as was R. Kelly, as was Bill Cosby. It's sad to see what we have come to with P. Diddy and with this entire case, and bless the women that, fell victim.
We were going to talk about this woman who owes DC almost $170,000 worth of traffic violations. We're going to have to follow that story, but we got to talk about this heat. I've got 2 minutes. Misha, what's your Beat the Heat story? I've got 2 minutes, and I got to get all three of you in. What's your Beat the Heat story?
Well, let's start by saying, and maybe Jennifer and Sonia can agree with me. I've been working so hard. I've been forced to beat the heat because I've been inside working. But that said, I do have a just quick funny story. Y'all know I work out every day, and I took my dogs on a briefer walk and run than we normally do due to the heat yesterday, significantly quicker. And I have a new puppy who's a pug, and they say pugs have breathing issues. And do you know, as soon as we hit that, I think half-mile mark, that pug was breathing so hard. I got a bigger workout by having to carry her the rest of the way. Not only did I did not beat the heat, but I did get an extra workout yesterday carrying a 15-pound dog.
Okay, Sonia, real quick, how are you beating the heat?
I'm from Georgia originally. It's always hot like this in the summertime there. So I just say, do what the old folks told you to do a long time ago. Get still, stay indoors, get still. When you're outside, walk slowly. And the modern day update of wear sunblock and stay hydrated. It really is that simple. Yeah, you can wear the cooler clothes, but follow what the old folks told you to do. The old folks down south say, get still and move slow.
Jennifer, beating the heat for you. What's your story real quick?
Just backing up what they said, stay hydrated, stay inside. But I'm going to use mine and say an unoriginal joke. It was so hot.
Yeah, how hot was it?
It was so hot. I saw a heat wave and I waved back.
Oh, I love it.
I love it. That is awesome.
And I thought this conversation was going to end on a boring note. I have 2 words for beating the heat: ice cream.
Oh,
Ice cream, pineapple spice ice cream. I'm not going to drop a name about where I get it, but it's some of the best ice cream I've ever had in my life. To heck with the pounds. Pineapple spice ice cream. Let's get it. Ladies, thank you all so very, very much. Be safe out in these news streets, and we certainly will be talking to you soon. That is the Daily Drum for this Wednesday, June 25th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.